Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon when you are watching this webinar. This is the final webinar in the series, webinar 4, with my colleagues and friends from Fremont Unified School District, as we're looking at the overview or prioritization of standards. And this one focuses on the power and critical importance that we have effective collaboration at all times, but certainly as we're determining our priority standards. We'll go ahead and jump right in. Hopefully you have the working handout that addressed webinar 3, where we focused on literacy as a shared responsibility with some specific examples for social studies teachers. And now we're on to our final webinar, number 4, the critical and importance of effective collaboration when determining priority standards. By the end of this specific webinar, the 2 success criteria pieces you should be able to complete is to be able to state 3 critical elements that drive what we're going to call collective teacher efficacy, and then determine possible next steps for your PLC and collaborative team to begin selecting priority standards for your course and your subject matter. So why is this so important at the collaborative level that we're looking at priority standards from that lens of effective collaboration? When we look at John Hattie's visible learning research, which is the research over the last 60 years that he has compiled that really drives a lot of what we're looking at now at what works best in our schools, collective teacher efficacy, which has an effect size of 1.57. So what that means simply, it's about 4 years growth in 1 year's time. That's 4 times more than the average of 0.4, which is what we see with everything that usually happens in our schools. What collective teacher efficacy means, first there's individual efficacy. I believe as a teacher that I have the ability to promote positive change in my students, to get the best and most out of them in terms of their growth. Collectively, when teachers come together, and I believe that if I'm doing my part and my peer's doing his part, and we are coming together and challenging each other to grow and to become better, we can collectively promote even greater outcomes for our students. And again, when we look at John Hattie's evidence, it is about growth and development, not just achievement. Because we have students that are achieving above grade level when they come into our classroom, we need to make sure they're still growing. And students who might be struggling in their learning, they might not achieve at the level that the state of California or individuals who are determining some cut scores for smarter balance, but they could be making huge growth. Collective teacher efficacy can make sure all of our students are learning at the highest level. But there's 3 things that need to be involved. It's not just saying we're going to have collective efficacy. It's number 1, teachers being able to apply new knowledge and develop mastery. We've talked about the importance of priority standards, that we can use them to gauge and guide our students to make sure that they're developing mastery in the essential pieces they need to. We must have positive interdependence to where we're accountable to each other. So at the 9th and 10th grade level, teachers of all subject matters know that what students do in 10th grade is directly determined by on how well and the focus of the important priority standards that were taught in the previous grade level. That's the one that I'm going to focus on for this particular webinar. And then we're having fine-grained discourse around student learning. We're making sure that we're looking at a deep level at what students are learning on a consistent basis and making sure that we're going past just our data scores and actually looking at student work. That's what drives collective efficacy. And what can unite that is what we'll call a common challenge. One of the common challenges we can simply have when we're looking at our priority standards is making sure that we're coming up with a solid list and we're agreeing to teach them at a deep level and teach and assess them well. So I just want to highlight some of the data and evidence that's already been collected. And one of the things that I was I don't want to use the word pleased, but I was impressed with was when we looked at when the team said, in my department, the majority of my PLC teams have not selected priority standards, selected them but need support, selected them and are ready to unwrap, and they're unwrapping and developing CFAs. This isn't a district that is willing, or teachers that are just going to say what would look good. We had a large chunk of our teachers saying, we haven't selected these yet, or if we have, we certainly need some support, or we've selected them, but we haven't moved on. Approximately half of the group has done that. This is a huge testament, I think, to the professionalism of the teachers to be honest about where you're at and what support you might need. And we look at the sort of district calendar where we were looking at moving this work forward, is that site visits taking place so that way you can develop your priority standards and you have some articles and some videos so that you can move forward. So moving into spring of this year, we're just starting to develop at least our draft list, or we've got a list that we've determined that we can begin to unwrap, or we agree, most importantly, the criteria for how priority standards will be selected. Because we can't always get together. Time is limited. Time not just with our students, but time in professional development and learning. We can't always get all of the science teachers together. So if the biology or chemistry or physics are in their PLC working on this, then they can come together eventually knowing that they're working with the same filter. Just like the pre-algebra and the algebra and the geometry teachers, or English 9, 10, and 11. That's what's so critical that that's happening now. So as we move forward into the school year, we will begin to have some consensus around what our priority standards will be. And we've all started with the same filters. We've all agreed upon what leverage, what readiness means within our discipline, and what endurance means. And eventually we can look at our external data from Smarter Balance or any of the other assessments we'll use. So I think you can see why this is so important to be doing it at the PLC level and to have that positive interdependence. And then teachers have to have the ability to develop mastery. Every learner, whether we're 15 or 50, needs a certain amount of practice, but none of us need the exact same amount of practice. Some teams are going to need to go at this at a deeper level. Some are going to take off running sooner than others. So back to our success criteria for this final webinar. Hopefully you've been able to state the 3 critical elements that drive collective teacher efficacy: mastery learning, positive interdependence, and fine-grained discourse around learning. Determine possible next steps for your PLC or collaborative team to begin selecting priority standards for your course or subject matter. As always, please feel free to ask any questions anytime at dave.nagel@corwinlearning.net. And as I've mentioned time and time again throughout this webinar series, please don't hesitate to shoot me an email and say you want to have a conversation, you want to have a phone call, or even a webinar like this that we could schedule and go deeper with some of the content that we've talked about, but specific to your PLC, your subject matter team. As always, I really appreciate the opportunity to share and learn with you, and I look forward to talking with all of you very, very soon.